Welcome to the Future of Tech. In this episode, we are honored to have Kambis Kohansal Vajargah with us, a leading figure in Austria's startup ecosystem and a true champion of innovation. As the head of startup services and the deputy head of founder services at the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, Kambis is dedicated to helping startups and entrepreneurs thrive, both locally and internationally. With a remarkable background as a serial entrepreneur, angel investor, and mentor to over 100 startups, he also serves as a European digital leader, driving digital transformation across the continent. Kambis brings invaluable insights into the intersection of technology, entrepreneurship, and public policy. Get ready for an inspiring conversation about the future of startups, innovation, and the trends shaping tomorrow's businesses. Let's dive in.
Yeah, hi Sander, nice to be here in your podcast. So my name is Kambis. I am the head of startup services and the deputy head of founder services at the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber for about 4 years now, which means that I serve, cover, and have the responsibility of all the startup founders, but also founders in general here in Austria, trying to service them, trying to educate them, but also try to lobby for them for better business conditions to set up the businesses here in Austria.
All right. And what inspired you? Because you have, I would say, quite a career so far. So what inspired you to focus on supporting innovation and startups?
Yep. So I've been a founder myself for almost 10 years. Started in 2011. Back at this time, I was like graduating from my university, the WU Vienna, and I started my first tech company, my first startup. So I've been a founder myself with several ventures in different verticals and sectors, from education to HR to mobility. And then I moved into angel investing, venture capital investing. And for me, it was logical at one point to go into policymaking. To be honest, it was still earlier than I thought it would be. But sometimes in life, opportunities are created, and then it's a decision of grabbing this opportunity or not. And I said, okay, I will grab it. I will try to do this. I switched somehow the sides, and not in a negative way, but in terms of like, okay, now you are part of a big public organization. The structures, the process are different, the mindset is different, but I can be part of this transition of a new organizational culture, which I'm trying to do now for 4 years, and it's going on quite well. And for me, I always like, supporting other founders in their life path, being their mentor. And I said, okay, why not going the next bigger stage and try to serve and support all the startups in Austria? That's why I did it.
Yeah, which is nice. And I think you will see a lot of new innovations and a lot of new ideas, obviously, which is interesting as well. At least I would find that very interesting to hear about different ideas people have or not.
Yeah, I mean, you need to spend time, for sure, and invest time. You need to listen very carefully, and you need to find time for all the different founders, and also like free founders. So not all of them have already founded a company, but some of them are in the ideation phase or in the pre-foundation phase. But what you see is like, okay, not just based on data and statistics, but real life conversations, what the people and the different founders are thinking about, how they want to challenge or tackle specific challenges in society, where the thoughts are going in terms of like innovation, technology. So you get a very personal and direct glimpse about what is happening. For instance, I can tell you based on the conversations I have, the younger the founders get, the more they try to institutionalize the SDGs, so Sustainable Development Goals, impact in terms of social economy, but also ecological, into the business model. That's something you can see because that's how they have been raised up. That's the way they think. automatically they try to integrate sustainability in the business model and try to somehow monitor it. That's something, for instance, what I can see based on the conversations I have.
Yeah, which I think is obviously a very good development. If it's a part of your, I would say, your identity to include that, obviously the ideas become better and better and more sustainable.
It's good to see. It's very good to see.
Yeah, I agree. And what did you do with your own startups and with your own ventures? Are you still running them or not?
So not operationally, because it's a full-time job which I'm doing at the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber. In German, it's called WKÖ, which is Österreich. I have a portfolio of startups, not just in Austria, but worldwide, where I am a shareholder and investor. So that's what I'm still doing, acting as an angel investor. And in the beginning, I was focused on Austria, then it got broader, and now it's actually worldwide, mostly in pre-seed and seed stage, but some of the startups are already even further, and they're making good revenue all around the world. And my role is more a strategic role, supporting them based on my experience, etc.
Okay. And so based on your experience and from your perspective, what do you think are the biggest challenges that tech startups face today, especially in Austria, but maybe also in Europe?
I mean, this could be seen as a challenge, but doesn't have to be necessarily. I mean, the access to private capital is more restricted compared to the pandemics. Think about 2020 to 2022. It was much easier to access private capital. The valuations were much higher. Everyone wanted to invest. You had a low interest policies, a lot of capital, and this fear of missing out from the investor perspective. Now it has changed. Not every tech companies, startup companies, software company will access that capital so easily. But it's not always just a bad development, because a lot of founders have pivoted in terms of like their mindset when it comes to access to capital. Instead of going for capital right from scratch, to focus on the product and the sales, to try to actually win the first customers, pilot customers, and that's how they want to actually fund themselves to some extent. They gain traction, the progress, and then they can actually get better funding later on. So that's something which some are struggling, but some also seeing this as an opportunity. Also, I think everything that includes high tech, research, science, their patience is very important. So you cannot expect, for instance, a company in the medtech sector to make money right from the beginning. Usually the average is 7 years until they enter the market and then monetize. So you need the capital until this moment. Could be public grants, could be private capital, but this kind of capital needs to be quite patient, patient, and the expectation that needs to be realistic. Apart from that, I mean, if you now consider Austria, Austria has progressed and evolved since 2011. It's a total different ecosystem, much more experienced founders, much more experienced institutions, organizations, much more international, many more talents than before. You have many more investors, domestic ones, but also international ones. So it's a different environment, but still, I think this is something in Europe is a problem all over Europe. Scalability. I actually think those startups who start in Europe and scale and go international in Europe are probably the best and most progressive ones, because scaling in Europe is more difficult compared to, let's say, in the US or China. Why? Because still, even if you have the European Union, it's still fragmented to some extent in terms of regulation, but also in terms of languages and mindset and culture. So scaling here is much more difficult, and this makes a really top founders. So I believe the big scale-up founders in Europe are the best ones internationally, worldwide. But still, this is an issue. This is a problem. So most of the startups in Austria go international after 2-3 years. It makes sense. Austria is very export oriented as a economy. Same with startups. But this is also still a challenge. We try to actually serve them and support them. We have like a big international network of offices all around the world. But still, it's more difficult than, let's say, in the US and China. So that's one issue. The access to capital. Still, I think there's too much bureaucracy and administrative processes and founding the company, particularly when it's a limited company, this is something where we can still improve. But comparing it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and so on, you always see improvement.
Yeah, and so looking at, for example, let's say the capital that you need, and when you have time, obviously, because you need to do research, is that something that let's say the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber can help with? Is that also part of what you do, or is it something that ventures should look for on their own?
So Austria in general, when it comes to early stage funding, has progressed in the last years, whether it's public or private. So we have one of the best, if not the best, early stage public grants infrastructure that is there. A lot of the research and the product development and so on are funded publicly. Also in terms of like private capital, it has progressed over time. We have much more investors, also international ones. But when it comes to scale up funding, so when you go international, let's say 10 million upwards, then it becomes really difficult. So you actually try to go for international investors and so on. And now the role of the Chamber of Commerce, the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, where I am, we have also grants. Grants we provide to startups, whether it's very early on in the foundation phase or when they go international. So we have specific funds designed for them. But apart from that, a lot of the inquiries I get is about accessing investors. So we try to matchmake them with investors, domestic ones, but also international ones. One example, for instance, in the last years, CVCs, corporate venture capital, has increased in Austria. A lot of bigger corporations going into this direction, and we try to matchmake them with the startups. We cannot cover all the activities. There are other organizations as well who support all the different grants institutions that are out there, like the FFG, the AWS in Vienna, die Wirtschaftsagentur Wien. These are all the German names, by the way, but also startup organizations, Austrian startups, Startup Life, Founders Institute, who also try to support them.
Yeah. All right. And so also I want to get back to, let's say, the scalability. So what you're saying now is that the scalability in Europe is more difficult because all of the different countries have different rules and regulations, or is it also a capacity issue?
It's not like that we have totally different regulations. It depends on the industry, on the sectors. They try to harmonize it. It has been harmonizing for decades now, but still, if you compare, the biggest market is Germany, 80 million in terms of people, or in terms of a number of companies, and it's decreasing in terms of total numbers. We don't have like the 100 million markets like in Asia or North America or wherever. So you have a lot of different countries, and you want to scale from one country to another. Also to Germany, it's easy, but from Germany, let's say, to France or Great Britain or wherever, then it becomes more difficult because, first of all, still differences in regulation, but also differences in languages and culture and so on. Capacity, now think about, let's say, the access to capital again, or how much is invested into the ecosystem. I mean, it has progressed over time, but just compare it to, let's say, the US or China, just when it comes to AI, for instance. I just checked the number recently. If you compare the US and Europe, the growth in productivity when it comes to corporates has quite decreased in Europe, where in the US it has increased since 2005. In between, you had the financial crisis, a real estate crisis, the pandemics, and so on. And in the US, still it really increased, but in Europe it somehow stagnated. Why? Because startups and tech companies are the ones who are actually driving this kind of growth in terms of productivity. And now, if you compare the total investment into startups, venture capital, and so on, then the US has a 5 times higher in terms of like investment volume compared to Europe. And this money was invested into new companies, new tech companies who actually drove this kind of productivity growth. So you can actually directly align it with each other and see what's the reason behind it. And this was a number by the IMF, by the way, the International Monetary Fund.
Yeah. And so how do you see then the role of the government, like or institutions like the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber in addressing these challenges and let's say um, maybe get back up to speed and compete with, US or China?
Mhm. So, I mean, we are still, we have the role of like Austrian companies, which are like around 600,000 companies that are member of the Chamber of Commerce, of the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber. We tried, for sure, our role is to lobby for them for better business environments. For instance, access to capital, access to grants, access to talents, access to markets, this right smart regulation. Still, we are also like have a big focus on Brussels as well, European Union. So we have our offices, a big office there as well. So we also for sure work for our companies directly at the European Union when it comes to new laws, regulation. We try to push it. I mean, you can have this impact. You can have impact, but you cannot do everything on your own when it comes to Europe. So you need a push from all the countries, which a lot of the Chamber of Commerces there are trying to do it, and that's where we actually can help, because when we have better regulation, smarter regulation, that's the way actually a lot of the challenges we have at the moment can be tackled in the best and most efficient way, and that's how we see it as a role. Get their voices, canalize it, and push it forward to the legislation, to the policy, and the lawmakers actually, who can change this very significantly if they want to.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so let's move slightly to, let's say, the future. So obviously this is the current situation and what we are trying to set up to make the future happen, obviously. So what kind of trends or technologies do you see? Obviously you have a vast experience with many startups, and you have a, let's say, deep insight in let's say, in the startup world. So what kind of trends or technologies do you see having the most significant impact on startups in the next 3 to 5 years?
Mhm. Yeah, good question. I mean, one is quite obvious. We have the era of AI in not just B2B, but also consumer tech. I mean, this is a technological wave which is actually deciding our society, our world in the upcoming years and decades. Um, um, AI, but also in combination with automation. So automation is also very important when it comes to technological trends. Um, Energy. Think about energy, and not just energy tech companies or startups, but actually the whole industry, the whole economic infrastructure of countries is built on access to energy. What kind of energy they use. So this is also something that is impacting startups as well. You have the topic of cybersecurity, which is increasing in combination with AI, by the way. So also a lot of business opportunities there for startups as well. And something which I think will be the next big technological wave after AI, and maybe in combination, quantum computing. And quantum computing is strong in Austria. We have really good research clusters and science clusters in Innsbruck and Vienna, good startup scale-ups in this field. This will be the next technological wave, and the combination again between these different technologies. So think about AI and quantum computing. What actually is the potential there? It's enormous. So maybe can I figure out?
Maybe it's good to explain to the listeners what quantum computing actually is.
Maybe how can I explain it in a way that it makes sense for everyone? I mean, first of all, you have to differentiate between hardware and software. So quantum computing actually impacts both. But imagine maybe this, which is I think the easiest way. So I guess most of you have heard, or most of the audience has heard about supercomputers. No? Supercomputers. Which have some kind of capacities and performance statistic that is, let's say, above the roof, which can make calculations in a way that is so much faster than anything we can imagine. Now, think about startups, for instance, building supercomputers with quantum technology, which means that the performance of these kind of computers, it's not just it will double or triple. We're talking about a multiplier of 100,000, 10,000 in terms of like performance. And think about countries or societies uses this kind of technology, for instance, for predicting the future to some extent. What can happen, or if that happens, how should we react, and so on. And quantum computing makes this possible because the technology is so much further. I mean, it's not totally new. You have been big companies like Samsung and so on working on it, but it's now getting more and more momentum. This, I would say, is the easiest way. Technology that actually leads to much higher performance in the future in a way that actually also products in the future, how they will be built, for instance, in terms of like the pace, the speed, and the performance.
And connect that to AI. That's obviously it's one on top of the other should produce amazing things, and at least far more speed, probably more in-depth calculations and analysis, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like something we cannot probably imagine now. This is something actually already happening. And the combination of these different and various technology will lead actually, or those countries who push this forward, they will be the ones actually leading in the future. That's how I see it. Something else I wanted to mention, for instance, now think about another vertical, space. Space sounds so far away. But the thing is, the tech that is going to be developed for the space actually will have direct impact, very probably direct impact on how we live here, because things will be tested out in space under different environment. And usually you will see like products that actually evolve out of it that can be used directly here. So this is also a big trend and movement, which will have direct impact on also the startups here who work in other industries or sectors. So I just want to give you the analogy and the affiliation with each other, that even if it feels so far away, there's direct correlation what will happen here.
Yeah, which is I think absolutely a view of the future, and something that we can expect, let's say, in the coming years. So if you look at AI and the development of AI, and then obviously the let's say the next wave, as you mentioned, of quantum computing, when do you expect, with your experience, what do you expect, in what time frame are we talking about?
Yeah, I mean, what I often see is that we expect things to come faster than they actually come. Let me give you an example. Just think about the Back to the Futures movies. I'm a big fan of them. We would already be hovering and flying, around the world. So the thing is, the technology might be even there, but it's not just the technology. It's about, first of all, is the regulation there? Is the acceptance there by the customers, by the people, by the society? So these are very important factors that decide when technology will be adopted or when not. So it's not just about the technology itself. It's about the regulation and the people who actually want to use it in the society. And that's why I'm very cautious when it comes to predicting, what will happen in the next 5-10 years. Yeah, maybe in a small core, maybe in very specific use cases, but not for the total broader audience. Because even now, think about ChatGPT, which actually went into the consumer market around 3 years ago. So everyone started using it. Still, it's huge in terms of like market penetration, but so many people are still not using it. So it's not like that everyone, every country, every society, every region is using it. And it's really big already. So I'm very cautious, but AI, for instance, in the B2B environment was already used, very penetrated 10 years ago, but only 3 years ago it really started in the consumer markets. And with quantum computing and the combination of AI and further technologies, I think about in decades, the next 10 years there will be big developments, and then again in the next 10 years. And the better the technology, the faster the growth, the faster we actually came forward. But still, it's about market acceptance in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. All right, and so if you look then at, let's say, the Austria's market and Austria's maybe in particular startup market, how does that compare to let's say the global market, and what strategic steps is Austria taking in this case to elevate it?
Mhm. So when I get these questions, where's Austria good when it comes to startups and tech? So let me give you some factors where we see that we're actually also based on data and statistics very good. One thing I already mentioned, we have one of the, if not the best, early stage public grants infrastructure that is out there. When you consider how much public grants is spent into early stage startups and tech companies when it comes to product development research, which actually limits the risk of failure as well. So this is one thing. We have very a high quality in terms of living standards. Austria overall, but particularly in Vienna, which is usually ranked on the very top. This is a factor. This is a factor for founders as well and for employees when they scale up. We see this that the factor of this living standards makes impact. Okay, who would come here, who wouldn't come here, and etc. So that's another thing. Third, we have still high labor productivity compared to other European countries. For instance, just to give you a number, if you compare, let's say, UK and Austria, in the UK, you need 5 days in terms of working to produce the same output that is being produced in Austria in 4 days. So still high productivity. Also, strategically, Austria is very interesting. Thinking about, for instance, India. A lot of Indian startups and companies, investors are going through Austria to access the European market. So strategically, it's very well positioned for emerging hubs and big markets like India as well. We have a new India-Austria startup bridge, and that's why we see a lot of activity here as well. And I will also want to share you another number, something that most would not believe. But if you compare the increase of venture capital investment from 2018 to now, 2014, so we're talking about 6-7 years, then Austria has the fourth highest increase worldwide. So number one is Switzerland, then you have Singapore, then you have the United Arab Emirates, and number 4 is Austria. Still, in terms of total investment, we're lagging behind. But when it comes to increase, it's like number 4. So we see a lot of developments. Some of the key verticals, industries, where we see good development. First of all, life sciences. So everything related to health, digital health, medical technology, biotech, and so on. Then for sure climate, ESG, mobility, real estate. We have 2 of the biggest European startups in prop tech and construction tech come from Austria. In terms of space, early stage only, not later stage, but early stage, we have 80 space tech companies, some of them world market leaders. And overall, what you can see, like the Austrian economy, the most staggering and successful startup companies are those who are focused on a specific niche in the B2B area. That's similar to Austria because we have a lot of hidden champions like Switzerland, like Germany, like Japan, and so on. So companies that might not be even publicly listed, but are focusing on a specific niche and are in the top 3 worldwide and below a certain revenue number, let's say below 5.5 billion euros turnover per year. Similar, it's with startups in Austria. We have great startups, not just in Vienna, but spread in Austria in very specific market niche in the B2B area. And they're one of the leading companies in this area, like Loxon, Copper Data, we have Dynatrace, we have Tractive, total different companies in a very specific niche. And that's where we are successful. We also have disadvantages, for sure. Access to later stage capital. Still, we need more talents as well. Also, people coming here. We need smarter regulation when it comes to founding the company, when going international, etc. So we have setbacks, but we also have advantages.
Yeah. So let's say that if you look at technologies or sectors that are emerging, that normally would be healthcare, climate, at least in Austria, at least healthcare, climate, maybe real estate and space, I would say, right?
Some of them, yeah. I mean, we have other, for instance, culture and technology or sports. For instance, sports tech, also upcoming verticals that are growing, which we're focusing on. Yeah.
Yeah, and so looking maybe slightly further ahead in the future, right? We already covered some of that, but what is your prediction on how technology and innovation will shape let's say, the traditional industries in Austria?
Mhm. I mean, they will shape them. They're already shaping them, and they will shape it even more. And now it's the question about how fast companies and industries react to it. Those who will react and act fast on it, they will have maybe struggles short term, but in the midterm and long term, they will actually be leading the way. So it's very important about when you adopt new technology, and those who adopted earlier will be leading. We have a lot of SMEs, that the whole economy in Austria is based on SMEs, similar to Germany, also kind of Switzerland and so on. A lot of European countries are like this. And now it's a question about what happens with them. Are they able to innovate and become more technological with a lot of traditional SMEs? And now it's a question about how fast can they become more technological? And I see a lot of potential here, because think about a lot of the companies who are already they were not just founded now. They were founded maybe 20 years, 30 years ago, family-driven, SME, maybe older generation, and now they actually need to hand it over somehow. They might not even find someone who will take it over, maybe not the children, for instance. So this is one thing. There's a lot of potential. These companies with a lot of bases already, employees, experience, and so on, customers, and taking them over. So mutually taking them over. So if they are willing to do so, and then make them more technological. That's a big trend I'm seeing, which will happen more and more, and we can see it in the numbers. What I also see, a lot of let's say side entrepreneurs, a side hustle entrepreneurs, you can call it like this. So a lot of people who are maybe employed somewhere, but they also found their own company and do it next to their job. This is something we see. The numbers are growing really. Also, we see more and more younger founders, but also more and more older founders. So more founders below 20. So I believe more young people out of school, not just believing it, we can see it already in the numbers, that they're moving into entrepreneurship, but also older generations, 50 upwards, are also moving into this direction. And these are some of the developments we can see, and we need to see, because the companies are the ones actually impacting the economy to a staggering amount. They drive innovation, they drive the society, and that's why we need to see more and more development into this direction. And some are leading, but a lot are not. They're lagging. And the question is, can we bring those who are lagging into a leading position as well?
Yeah. And so what advice would you give then to, let's say that we have listeners who just founded the company or are planning to found a new startup? What advice would you give them to future-proof, let's say, their venture?
First of all, always build a big peer group of other founders and entrepreneurs who are more experienced, where you can get actually access mentoring or know-how. This is something that helped me when I was still a founder. Having 3-4 people where I can always exchange ideas and thoughts is one thing. Second, observing the market, not just domestically, but worldwide, really worldwide. I'm not talking about Germany, Austria, Switzerland, about Europe. I'm talking about worldwide. What is happening where? Okay. So a lot about market research, trend analysis, and so on. Third, question yourself if you want to start something from scratch, or maybe as an option, which I just mentioned, taking something over that is already there and then try to make it more technological, more innovative, etc. That's also something which I think has a lot of startup potential. A lot of the startup founders don't think about it, but taking something over and then try to innovate it. Apart from that, come to us, come to the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, come to me, and we will support you as well. If you're in Austria, use all the grants we have. Access them. Don't let something out of it or miss something. I think if there's the opportunity, use it, but you need to have the overview first. And also be ready to pivot if it's necessary. So what I see in good founding teams or founders is that they have this willingness to change the business model, the product, strategy, etc., when it becomes necessary, which doesn't mean that you should change it all the time because you see just opportunities. You need also some kind of steadiness and consistency. But if market behavior changes, if consumer behavior changes, if the competition, for instance, moves into a new direction, you should always, first of all, see and observe what is happening. You need to be very close to your competition, to the market, to the consumers, but also be willing to pivot to some extent if it's necessary and adopt new technology as fast as it gets.
Yeah, which is also, I think, a very valuable insight as well. So maybe you have since you have a vast experience with startups, with your own, but also with mentoring many others. Do you have an inspiring success story that you work with that maybe people know about now or that made a significant impact?
Yep. I mean, there are for sure several ones of the people I've worked with. I want to tell you one out of my own experience. So 2 weeks ago, an exit was announced by Newfluence, the company of Newfluence, which was formerly known as Freebiebox. This was a company where I was a shareholder and even a CEO for 2.5 years when I was still operationally active as a founder. And the story is like this. The main founder, Moritz Lechner, was at the age of 14 years old, 14, when he had this idea of this kind of surprise box filled with giveaways. And drew a business partner. I got to know him, and we had our first meeting in a cafe in Vienna. A very old one. He was very young. He was 14 years old. It was his pupils at school, but he was very talented and had a lot of ambitions. And he wanted actually to go for this business. And his mother also was an entrepreneur, and his father as well. So he had this kind of spirit. And I said, okay, I will mentor you. I will be working with you, accompanying you, and so on. And initially, we then found a company. And in Austria, you cannot run a company when you're below 18 years by regulation. That's different to other countries. So I had to take it over as a CEO, and it was not my full-time job because I had my own startups and ventures as well. But I took it over, and we tried to actually implement processes, structure it, refine the business development. And he was already growing and progressing, gaining a lot of experiences, adopting a lot of new stuff. In the followings, we found, so one of the goals was actually not that I will be there permanently, but just temporarily until he can take over. But we needed to look for another co-founder as well. And it took us some time, years, but we found one, Christopher Pollard. And that's how we formed this team. And because of their, young spirit, they were also invited to the TV, like a Shark Tank format called 200 Millionen. They presented there, and there they also found very prominent investors. The founders of Runtastic, which was a high-scaling startup, and exited for 200 million euros back at time. So they also invested. And there were also other investors and business partners. Tax accountants like Ecovis, angel investors like Markus Kainz, etc. And we tried to help them, building their own company. And we had difficult times, I can tell you. We had times where we didn't have liquidity and no cash, and the product also didn't work fully. So we had to pivot, and we pivoted once, and it also didn't work. So we had to pivot another time, and that's how Newfluence was actually created. And at one point, I went outwards because they had like actually they were now at the age of Moritz was then 18 and Chris was also in the 20s, so they can handle the company on their own. They did it. They did it very well. They actually scaled it to 50 employees, a million revenue business, which was very profitable. And 2 weeks ago, they announced then their exit to a bigger Hamburg agency group. And you have to imagine he's like 20 years old and he made his first exit. Christopher also in the 20s, his first exit, which is a million exit. So they are now millionaires. And we had so many challenges in terms of regulation, in terms of business problems. It was a different situation because it was a pupil. So you had this fear that you will miss his youth because of working so much all the time. But in the end, we handle everything. And it became a very successful company, and they become very successful entrepreneurs.
Yeah, well, it's an amazing story. So obviously we could talk for hours more, I would say, but at some point we have to wrap it up. So Kambis, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your invaluable insights and your passion for fostering innovation and helping startups thrive is absolutely inspiring. And I'm sure that our listeners will find your advice both practical and motivating. So for those tuning in, be sure to explore more of the amazing work being done at the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber. And if you're a budding entrepreneur, this is a place to find support. So thanks again, Kambis, and to all of our listeners. And we'll see you next time on The Future of Tech.